welcome to our panel on the future of payments. Thanks for being here. My name is Tham. I'm the Senior Director of Debit Payments at CIBC. We'll start off the discussion with a discussion, but we'll save your questions towards the end. So please use the Ask the Speaker box on the top right of your screen, and we'll try to cover as much as we can towards the end. Before we get started, I would like to take some time to do a quick introduction. I'm going to get our panelists to introduce themselves, but also I'll ask them a quick icebreaker question. So my panelists, when was the last time you used cash and for what purpose? Let's start with Ramón.
Thank you, Moon. Ramón Villarreal. I am Chief Technologist for Payments in Red Hat. And that's a really interesting question. So about two weeks ago, I went in a trip around the countryside here in the UK, and I had to go to some really small, areas in which basically it's really difficult to be able to pay with card. So I would say 2 weeks, but before that, it's been almost a year since I actually had to pay with cash.
Wow.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. What about you, Lorna?
Good morning, Lorna Godin. I am a Senior Director Everyday Payments in the Enterprise Payments team at CIBC. Last time I used cash was to give my kids a treat to take off to the corner store with their friends.
And how long ago was
Probably
that?
a couple of days ago, actually.
Oh, okay. Also,
yeah.
Okay, not long ago. Okay. Keith, what about you?
Sure, thanks, Mun. Vinay Prabhakar.
So Keith Ajmani.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Vinay. Sorry, I thought you said Keith. Go ahead.
I didn't hear. Sorry about that. Vinay Prabhakar, VP of Marketing at Volante Technologies. And normally that is a question that is actually hard for me to answer because I actually use cash a lot. I'm embarrassed to say it, but mostly for small transactions, right? This time it's actually very easy. Was the Sunday before last, so whatever that is, 14, 15 days ago. It was for a cup of coffee, which is what I usually pay cash for. And the reason I remember that so clearly is that on Monday, I tested COVID positive. Okay. Oh. And I'm fine, thank you. And also, audience, please don't go away. You can't catch it from me this way. But because of that, then I was isolating. I wasn't going in the shops or anything like that, but I still needed to make purchases. And I can tell you, I'm very grateful that we do live in an economy where it is possible to make all those transactions digitally. So that's my situation. And sorry to have interrupted you, Keith.
No problem. I misheard. So Keith Ajmani, VP Platform Engineering and Transformation at Interac. And last time I used money, similar to Lorna, my kids. A couple of weeks ago, they wanted some money to go. I live near Chinatown in Toronto. They only take cash in some of the stores, and so they wanted a bit of money. But I'm getting them to get my kids off cash. They're like 10 years old, and so now I've got them signed up. It's not a plug. RBC has this thing called Mido, which puts all their chores on it. They get paid, and they get a credit card, and they are so excited to have a credit card. It's a prepaid cash card. And so their allowance goes straight out of that. Now they've gone crazy going to like the Circle K with that. So I think cash is done with them. So for me, that was it. And before that, like Ramón, like 2 years. I haven't even taken money out of the bank, I'd say, in 2 years. I don't even carry cash with me anymore.
So a year ago, a few days ago for the rest of you, mainly for kids and then for small purchases. Okay, interesting. So let's imagine a future without cash, right? So we're here to talk about digital payments. What are some emerging trends that come to mind and innovations that's like, improving our daily lives? Maybe Vinay, let's start with you.
Okay, not Keith, right? It's me this time?
Yeah, Vinay.
Okay, thank you. So a couple of things. I think there's a broader point here about what we really mean by cash, right? So I think most of us would say, okay, cash is paper money, right? But there's a segment in the industry that would say, well, actually, cash is really any form of value exchange that can be convertible to a regular currency, right? So that really, if you really want to be, a digital and cashless player, then you've got to be in cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, etc. And that's a valid point. It's something that we should think about. But in terms of moving into the future, there are a couple of things I would note here. One is that as an industry, what we tend to do is we proliferate payment mechanisms. Okay, there are, for consumers and businesses today, there are about twice as many ways to pay and be paid as there were 10 years ago. And I would guess that 10 years from now or 5 years from now, that there will be twice as many again. We tend not to retire these things. Even checks, right? We're talking about cashless payments, but checks, some interesting statistics from Payments Canada, the volume of checks have dropped by 60%, right, since over the last 5 or 6 years. But the total value of these checks is about the same, all right? So people are writing fewer checks, but they're bigger amounts, I guess, right? So I think a lot of it has to do with what are humans accustomed to, right? What experiences do we like to stick to? And I would put my money, I guess, cashless or otherwise, on the future really being driven by our preferences as consumers and businesses for what I call paymentless experiences, right? Forget about cashless. I don't think any of us really wants to make a payment, right? We want to have experiences, but for most of us, the end point of that experience, which is the payment, is a painful one. It's an onerous one, right? We like to shop. You go to the store, right? Whether it's online or not. At the end, well, you have to check out. Either you stand in line or you go through like 8 clicks to do something. Not a great experience. The former taxi experience. You get in, okay, you have to tell the person where to go. You have to give them directions so they don't know your neighborhood, right? And then you get there, and then there's 3 minutes spent paying. We want them to be paid. We don't really want to pay. So the notion of paymentless experiences, getting out of the Uber or the Lyft or whatever, and having the payment be a result of the experience, right? The notion that you can just push your cart out of a grocery store, right? Or pick up a book at a bookstore and have it be automatically scanned because the bookstore has your loyalty card. I think that's the future of payments, is where it becomes transparent and almost a background to the other things that are happening in that chain of user experience.
Amazing. I'm just listening to you. I'm looking at the chat as well. It seems like, the audience is really interested in the cash and how we serve in like certain communities. So thank you, Vinay, for that. And maybe Lorna, what do you think? When you think about the future without cash, what are some trends that come to mind?
So yeah. So the digitization that happened over the course of the pandemic, it created greater public awareness of the vast number of payment alternatives. To Vinay's point, we've almost proliferated payment types. And the trends are remaining steady post-pandemic. And so as we think of the way forward for digital payments, cash, and I'm seeing it in the chat as well, in a number of kind of immediate in-person payment scenarios, the use case remains unsolved and clunky. Trends are sort of getting us there, but solving for every scenario is going to continue to trip us up. So if you think about my scenario, giving the kids a $5 bill to be able to go to the corner store with their friends, it was easy. I reached into my wallet, I grabbed $5. They each had a built-in limit. They had the freedom to choose when they got to the store within kind of the limit parameters, and that's a real life experience for them. But there remain very few payment options out there that can provide kind of that flexibility, barring MyDo, to Keith's point. So as I thought through the example, I kind of immediately went to the question of habit. We'll talk about habit again. Like, I'm a habitual digital wallet and e-commerce user. Is there a better way that I can get it done without sending my kid off with, a credit card? Because I think my kids are probably a little younger than Keith's, or my phone, like $1,000 device in their pocket, right? Does it look like the prepaid card, similar to the MyDo concept? Does it look like something like a Disney Magic Band device that has parental controls, and sort of to expand the concepts moving into the digital ID space, right? And I can put parameters on to keep the kids under a certain amount, but still give them some freedom. So these are the questions that kind of need to continue to be explored. The trend that sees the new players coming in who are starting to explore these use cases is very much going to get us toward the end of cash. But kind of getting back to the question, the options are really ever expanding. They'll continue to expand as the market solves for sort of that next challenge, as we work to eliminate the physical cash and checks from the system.
What about Ramon? You are the one that used cash the longest time ago. Curious to know your thoughts.
I think it's interesting. Thank you, Moon, and Lorna and Vinay. I think it's quite interesting that what we are talking here, and I think the key step that we mentioned is what Vinay said. We need to talk is what are the future of the instruments of payment, and for how are we going to facilitate all the different transactions that are going to be happening in the market. What we need to guarantee is, on one side, the execution of digital payments, and what will be the technologies that will be enabling those transactions that don't need to have a physical interchange of a banknote. Whereas, how do we cater for the requirements that are coming in from, for example, what Lorna has? I want to give my kids a note to actually go and buy whatever they want. Or the new use cases, I want to have a note that is going to be assigned for executing a specific payment. And when you look at the market, and I have a bit of an advantage here because I work with different countries, globally, you can see that a lot of different countries are driving in that direction. You can see, for example, what India or Brazil are doing instead of QR code payment. Is actually quite an interesting use case and implementation for facilitating that payment and giving the ability to somebody have something that they can go into the shop and execute a payment. So that serves the use case that Lorna was mentioning before. At the same time, you have on the other side the implementation of CBDCs, which is quite interesting, for example, for enterprises, for simplifying the process of transaction between different organizations and maximizing that relationship and reducing the time of execution of the settlement. There is a lot of different use cases, and there is a lot of different technologies and instruments that are going to be coming out. And I guess the key thing is, what is going to be the method of adoption of all these technologies? That is going to be the next question. On the other side, interesting, we need to think, we are thinking about what Vinay was saying around the experiences. And we work, and in Red Hat, we work not only with financial services institutions, but also with a lot of the manufacturers or technology organizations that are actually thinking, well, I want to enable my customer to execute a payment within my engine, within my car, within my system. And how those processes of embedding the payment within that experience, that is starting to happen right now. And we are already doing work in implementing those connection between the experience and the payments, and that relationship directly between the customer, the technology, and the bank and the financial institution. And that, I think, is going to be a key in that next step. So quite an interesting market, and I think it's just what is going to be adopted. That is the key question.
Yeah, interesting point. Let's unpack that a little bit more. So you talked about the cash, well, when they has the term cashless payment experience, or some would call embedded payments. So in general, because we have bankers here, so there's always this view that banks will get disintermediated from the payments experience, right? Like like Uber, right? You go from taxi where you used to use cash to Uber where there's no more cash at all. What is the role of banks in the future in embedded payments type of experience? Lorna, I'm gonna get you to start, and then Keith, you can jump in afterwards. I know you used to be a banker too, but let's hear from Lorna first.
So First of all, I think Canadian banks have proven that they can evolve. So we've spent the last 150 years evolving from our roots, right? I think the key now is pace. So that pace really can only be achieved through partnerships right across the ecosystem. So if you think about the overall experience to consumers and to businesses, we're going to be driving out new business models that will change our role in the payment experience. So back to the invisible payment or the embedded payment, we probably become a seamless, resilient processor with value provided through the client experience and trust in the system. So as it's imperative upon the kind of incumbents to maintain that security and trust in the system. And I think we need to leverage our partnerships, leverage our internal expertise to build that foundation, ensure that we have the resilient infrastructure needed for 24/7, 365 payment processing. It's not flashy work, but the stakes are really high. As we continue down that journey of embedded payments, we need to look toward cloud technology and flexible APIs, and those are just the beginnings of significant investments that need to be made to ensure that our systems are protected, resilient, usable, and provide all of the foundation that's needed for Canadians to be able to move forward in their payment types. So disintermediate, I don't think so. We are definitely going to have to continue to change and evolve. But I think our role will become very different, and how we define those business models will be important. How we leverage partners from the back end right through to the front end to create those seamless experiences will be really, really important.
Agree, totally agree. And Keith, what are your thoughts? You used to work for a bank, now you work for Interac. Are banks getting off the picture?
Yeah, I worked for a couple of things. No, I think they're always going to have a role, right? The banks are the custodian of the funds or the book of record for consumers, and they're going to remain front of mind or near front of mind, even in a frictionless experience like Uber, right? You still get a confirmation of your payment method if you have a couple of cards in there. And so I do think that kind of war for top of wallet and who's the first or the default payment vehicle will continue to happen in the background. And so they'll still find ways to have an appearance there. As the government moves towards implementing an open banking system in the next few years, there are going to be new innovators and there will be new direct consumer experiences for sure. And they'll be building, you'll take data aggregation models like we all know Mint has been doing for years. Obviously getting away from the sort of screen scraping credential sharing concerns. But those data aggregation APIs will inevitably move towards right-based APIs where you can actually initiate a payment and initiate transactions. It will take time. They'll need to be comfort level when it's proven safe and secure. And that will just continue to unlock use cases. But I do agree with Lorna, all those experiences on the front end, they're still underpinned on the back by the financial institutions as a 7/24 systems. And so there'll be some still presence, I think, there for them. I've seen a few banks, I don't know why we keep on talking about Mido other than the fact that I use it a lot. But I've seen TD and others do it as well, CIBC as well, introducing new apps and experiences that are actually not about the bank, but about a brand or a customer experience. And then very subtly, at the bottom left, say, powered by CIBC. So I think I'll continue to watch that kind of halo effect that's going on there and see how they change how they play in a space where today is very transactional. Look at your account balance to change from being more about providing a product or service in support of consumers' lifestyles. And hopefully everyone can still hear me because I just saw in the chat someone said they can't hear me. I'm good? Okay. So yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the banks respond in this place. But I think they'll still have a role, but there's a good chance there'll be many new experiences where they're not as visible or present.
Yeah. Let's hear from a technology firm. Vinay, what about you? When you talk to your bank clients, what are their thoughts? Are they worried? What have you seen?
Sure. So, and the question is really about disintermediation, right? Whether this new world of crypto and digital and embedded payments is going to disintermediate banks. Certainly, our clients, that's something that our clients are concerned about, right? That is why they're very focused on modernization, right? Payments modernization, technology modernization, cloud, APIs, ISO 20022, all of the things that we help them with as technology modernization partners to financial institutions. But with disintermediation, I think it's important for us to remember that we tend to think of it in kind of binary terms, right? Will banks be disintermediated or not? Okay. I think it's more realistic to think in terms of it being a spectrum, right? So there is the specter of disintermediation by 1,000 cuts, right? Where financial institutions start losing control of some of the means of exchanging value. Okay, a digital wallet, you can have exchange of value and goods without a bank account involved in that experience. Now, eventually, yes, it has to be converted. But if it's a non-fiat currency, then it doesn't necessarily need to be converted, right? So if as a financial institution, you start losing control of some of the methods of exchange of value, and you also start losing control of the customer experience, right? The customer experience is being provided by something else, a fridge that you open, which is automatically, I don't know if this will ever happen, right? Ordering groceries, I don't know. It may. I'm just making that up almost, but that's the customer experience, right? So you lose the customer experience, you lose the exchange of value, then the underpinnings of the success that banks have had, which is they are, as Keith said, the stewards of compliance, the stewards of the account relationship, become less relevant. So I think the key for financial institutions, and again, this is why a lot of the organizations that we work with are very focused on modernization, is actually embracing that new world, right? Embracing the fact that banks actually need to think more like fintechs, right? Both in their terms of business strategies and technology strategies, and jump right in, right? Start being a steward of customer experience. Start incorporating other digital methods of value exchange, crypto, whatever it is, because the more banks feel that, well, we got it good, right? We have this going well, the greater the threat is, and that's really the danger is that complacency. Lorna, I think you started with a word that's very close to our heart at Volante, evolve, right? That's what we do, right? We give our customers the freedom to evolve, and through technology. And that is tremendously important that banks be thinking in terms of how can we accelerate our own evolution rather than how can we maintain a status quo.
Interesting. So what we're hearing is, not yet, depends. As long as we stay using fiat currency, the banks are still in the picture. But if in the future of not like digital currencies, maybe then we'll have a shift in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Well, how about let's fast forward a little bit in the future when we think about kind of in the next generation of digital payments. Instead of moving money, instead of moving kind of like currencies, people have been talking about it becomes like a data movement trend. Like that's what is gonna govern the future of payments. We're not really just moving money, we're actually moving data that goes with it, and really just moving data, period. Any one of you, do you agree with this kind of direction of where this payments is going? Who wants to take the first?
I kind of start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, we see it nowadays, and in Red Hat, our work is all around technology, but especially in our relationship with our customer, we are seeing how the data is being increased and how the way that that data increase is affecting the relationship of the payment. It's influencing all the different directions that things are going. If you think, for example, about around the concept of digital payment and digital currencies, it's all about the movement of data. Now, the main concern in there, and I can see there is some questions in the chat that talk about the concerns around anti-money laundering and the potential risk of the transaction. I think it is important that we have in mind that when we are bringing all this transaction into that relationship of data, we are going to start acquiring more data of the who and what and why the transaction is happening. And our system have evolved to a point that we can do the right treatment of that data, and actually we can start taking it into the next level. We've been doing we did a really great work recently with Swift, in which we work around a way for them to actually do treatment of data through AI and ML models. And actually, it was quite interesting because the ideas for what they are going to be doing with that data and how are they going to be using it for anti-money laundering purposes, for risk management purposes, but also to offer new capabilities to their customers is quite interesting. And what are they doing with that transaction? The next level of implementation is quite interesting. I can see this technology being expanded and being applied in a lot of different organizations. And I think one of the next step for financial institutions, especially to keep evolving in that direction, is to understand that payment is a movement of data, but it's also a guarantee of that relationship between two partners. So if you, the key is to provide the right technology to ensure that relationship is working the best way possible.
Keith, what do you think as a network operator, how do you ensure that exchange of data across the network secure, like privacy concerns and all that? Can you help us understand your approach to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a dark side to data, right? Like you have to be careful, right?
Yes.
I mean, you hear all the things Ramón just said. You got this data, you can build profiles, you can build models, which is great. But it has to be done in a way that, you're not misusing it or oversharing it, right? One space we at Interac are exploring a lot is digital identity, right? And so just because you can share a lot of information doesn't mean you should share all of it in every single interaction, in every single case, right? So for example, say you digitize your driver's license and you want to do a payment at the LCBO. They don't need to know your date of birth. If you show your card, they say they don't need to know your address. They need proof that you're you, and they need proof that you are of age. They don't need to know how old you are, which is something I would prefer. So it's a fine balance, right? As this happens, as we started to do it in the consumer space, and consumers have become so used to just giving away their data. We have to be aware, I guess, of that balance. I think in the commercial space, there's so much promise for the data and the data going with the payment. We have data with payments today in Canada. It's just very clunky. It's out of band. If you've worked with our AFT, EFT solutions and EDI and the way we sort of do stuff on the side and have market-specific interpretations of different fields. So what ISO 20022 brings in that is carrying the data with the payment, which is very simple, but also brings an international standardization. So within the country and across borders, what a field generally is going to mean. So that's super helpful for companies that are running a huge number of accounts receivable, accounts payable, reconciliation processes manually that they can automate. So you can really see efficiencies start to arrive. It's going to take time though, for sure. So but I do think controlling the scope of data relevant to the exchange of value is going to be a careful balance, especially in a consumer marketplace where people give a lot of their information away.
Yeah, I was actually attended the session yesterday by the BMO team. They were talking about kind of fraudsters, how they attack victims, and it was like their technology is really advanced, almost as advanced as us in the industry. So
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Everything new, all those new services that are going to come to market, everything new is where the fraudsters go first. You launch a new product, a new service that is the first, they shift immediately and find the flaws. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's almost like they use AI and ML for a different reason, for bad, like from the other angle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you can guarantee they are using it.
Right.
They got this money in it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an arms race, it really is what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm.
And so, Vinay, what do you think about data movement? That's the future of payments.
No question, right? I mean, if I could agree 200% with something, I would. I think we would all vehemently agree on this panel. The question is really who becomes the stewards of that data, right? And how do we ensure that every link in the chain has the right technological strength to take that data in and send that data out, right? And there's a lot of discussion at the conference about ISO 20022, so it would be remiss of us not to spend at least a minute on that, in this panel. Clearly, I think the direction that things are going is that ISO 20022 is going to be the lingua franca for payments and therefore for payment data exchange, right? Now, in order for that to work, firstly, all participants in whatever we call let's use the word metaverse as well, right? Because that's fashionable also. All participants, right, are going to have to be able to exchange data and understand it equally. I think that's really important. And this is where financial institutions, because of their long history of technology, investment actually are a little bit of a disadvantage, right? In that most financial institutions, large and small, in Canada, in the US, globally, really all over the world, are struggling with a legacy kit that does not support ISO 20022 messaging, right? So a lot of what we do is work with our customers to get them to incremental, what I would call right-size modernization, right? Meaning that it's not going to be possible to replace legacy systems, but you can insulate them, right? There are technologies that are based on APIs, for example, using a cloud service, real-time enablement, right? Making sure that you can, on a 24/7 basis, take this data in and out. Dealing with data truncation, right? It's almost never going to be the case that everybody can process or manage the same amount or volume of data, right? There's always going to be data lopped off, and sometimes it's going to be essential sensitive data. There was a question in the chat about AML, for example, right? Well, the more data you have, the more there is to run an anti-money laundering check or a sanctions check, right? But you've got to make sure that data is there and it's captured. So in the end, ISO 20022 is a data strategy. It's also a technology strategy where institutions need to look at end-to-end ISO 20022 enablement. It is not good enough just to say, well, RTR or whatever the new payment system is going to be is ISO 22 based. So we learn how to send ISO 22 messages back and forth to the clearing. That's not going to be good enough. You have to exchange ISO 20022 with customers, with counterparties, with fintech partners. And that whole notion of working together with fintech partners in a low-code environment where we can develop these customer experiences that are powered by ISO 20022 very quickly. That's where we need to be headed together, really. So absolutely, yeah. Data is it, and ISO 20022 is how we're going to get there.
And the metaverse.
In the metaverse, yes. Let's not forget the metaverse.
I'm still resisting that. Like that one, it's gonna take me like maybe 2-3 years to figure out what that means.
I think Lorna's kids probably already have it figured out, I would guess.
In spades.
My kids love the metaverse. Yes.
Fortnite, Minecraft, Roblox, you name it.
Okay. Let's just stay in this current universe first before we go there. So I am reading the Ask the Speaker chat. There are 4 questions. Shall we try to attempt answer some of them before we wrap up the session? So the first one came from Peter. He's asking, what is the impact of cash reduction on marginalized communities? So I'm guessing one of the 2 bankers may have some thoughts on this, or maybe the technology firms have thoughts on this. Who wants to take it?
Well, I can tell you a little bit of what we are seeing, what I've been seeing in Latin America, which is quite interesting and relevant for that conversation. In Latin America, actually, there is several countries that you are seeing that they are driving initiatives of digitalization. Because one of the interesting thing is not a lot of people has in Latin America, not a lot of people tend to have a bank, but a lot of people tend to have a mobile phone.
Yes.
And it's quite interesting because that drive to digitalization is helping the banks in Latin America reach their own bank, actually, and establish that relationship between the people that don't want to have a bank account because they want to enter into the new economy. So it's quite interesting to see how that process of digitalization and that process of bringing in new methods of payment is actually bringing in people that tend to be in different environments and are in that marginalized space into actually getting into the formal economy. Another thing that you see, and I see this in Europe, I like to comment in this, people that is actually asking for donations that are using payment systems through their phone, and that is in there. So I think it's actually is the contrary, is bringing them closer to participate in that economy. But I like somebody else to provide some thoughts.
Well, there's also the comment about what if the communities or groups have no access to technology, right? Like, how would we serve that community? Imagine they don't have a cell phone, or data is slow,
or even a bank account.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, no,
well,
yeah.
I will let somebody else answer the question. Actually, I can continue, but maybe
I have a quick thought about that, right? And I don't know that we necessarily have the answer here, but a couple of things. One is that as an industry, it's really important for us to be thinking not just about the rails and the customer experiences, but how can we actually deliver more value to society through what we're doing. We could argue that some of the technological advances the past 20 years, maybe, pick social networks, have been developed, created without a real thought as well, what could be the negative impacts of this, right? And I think the questions in the speaker chat do indicate that there's a lot of concern around, bring back that word disintermediation, right? Are we disintermediating our own communities, our own marginalized communities? But a specific answer to the question, possibly, right, is if they don't have a bank account, they don't have cash, they're still part of some system. Maybe there is a local institution, maybe it's a church or a religious organization, maybe it's a nonprofit, right, that they're somehow connected to. So the key here then is thinking about reducing the numbers of the unbanked without thinking about that as giving them access to more banking services delivered by banks. Okay, banking services, sorry to say this with banks, they don't have to be delivered by banks. Banks can be involved, banks should be involved, right? But if we just expand the envelope a little bit and think about banking services as potentially being delivered through many, many different channels and organizations, and we are building customer experiences, technology, payment rails to facilitate that, then I think we will, address the concerns, the valid concerns of those asking in the speaker chat. Absolutely.
Maybe let's move on to the second question. I think, Keith, this is for you. Interac Online was an incredibly useful payment method, especially for customer-initiated payments. E-transfer, though, is not a feasible option for larger organizations. So due to the low FI subscription to Interac Online, what will be taking its place?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not dead. It is still there. There are just some nuances of its availability that affect it. I would say, we do have offerings. We launched last summer. We did launch an Interac for Business solution, which allows account-based payments, ISO enabled for commercial, very much targeted at the commercial segment and providing payments that are account-based from their targeting versus our traditional aliasing. So we're continuing to bring capabilities to market, I think, to serve that and look at that space beyond just the consumer side. I can't speak to what might take its place someday in the future, other than to say it's a space we continue to focus on for sure, supporting e-commerce and enabling e-commerce. And nobody likes to see their product adoption dwindle. So I mean, I think what I would say is we did launch something last year, and there's probably some more things coming over time as well.
Good to hear
So it's
that.
a good question. Appreciate it.
Okay, the last question is actually quite interesting. Basically, it's around the payment method is dictated by the beneficiary of the payment. What are your thoughts? Would we ever shift to a mechanism where the sender gets to decide how they want to send it?
I can jump in here, just a little commentary. I think this is where a lot of the data and the usefulness and the insight of the data helps us from a broader perspective, not necessarily from a person-to-person insight perspective, but broader inquiry into data and understanding of what those beneficiary habits are, rather than just the payer habits are, will help us to zero in what are those use cases that we do need to solve for. Sort of back to experiences. Does the experience of the beneficiary play a bigger role than the sender? Appreciate that the sender wants to send a certain way, but how do we balance that to make sure that all parties are getting the benefit of the experience and of our ability to understand what those experiences need to be? I appreciate sort of the commercial perspective as well, where commercial recipients absolutely want to be able to define how they receive their cash, how quickly they receive their cash, what are the terms around the ability to pay. So going back to that, I'll call it the honeypot of data, will be really important for us to be able to appropriately ingest and understand what both sides of the transaction need.
I think it's to explain the value prop of having more data, kind of the different payment methods for both the sender and the recipients, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is a place where innovation and moving towards an API economy for banking is huge options for disruption, right? Where and you see this already in some of the sort of more closed loop systems, right? Where you don't know, like I could send money to somebody on PayPal, it's coming from, you don't know where I'm sourcing it from on my side, my bank account, my credit card, and I don't know how it's getting it on the other end, right? You look at TransferWise, where you're moving money between countries, huge disruptor, right? They were playing with Ripple at one point, or using it at one point under the scenes, right? So the opportunity for sure for people to insert them in the middle and provide that sort of seamless conversion between different payment vehicles is huge. And I think obviously, the recipients want to get it in one way, the senders usually want to send it the cheapest way. So you can almost have a brokering type model, right? There's a financial institution I used to work for here in Canada who did something that was like, where do you want to send your payment, right? A payment is a payment is a payment. And your choice is, where do you want to send it? How fast do you want it to get there? And what are you willing to pay? And then you present the options, right? So you get, it's a very interesting dynamic of, today we force consumers or businesses to figure out, I need to do it. What the heck is a wire? Most people like, what's a wire? What's LVTS or links? Like, people don't know that. They just, I need to pay for this. So the more we can do to take that away from having to figure out what the heck it is will be very, very helpful. Great opportunity for disruption. Sorry, Ramón.
No, please. Sorry that I interrupted you. I think it's interesting.
No, actually, Ramón, we only have 1 minute left. Maybe I can ask you to close us and give us the closing thought.
Closing thoughts. Look, the world is changing. The world of payment is changing constantly, and there's a lot of different technologies coming in. I think the next 5 years are going to be defined by what is the level of adoption of each one of those technologies, and what is the world that we are going to be defined by them. Not only for the customer, but also for the partnership. The other key thing is the future is all around ecosystems, and the relationship between multiple organization is going to define the way that we are going to build the next generation of payment systems.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, panelists. It has been a very interesting session. So I know that cash may stay around for a little bit more, but until we remove all this clunky experience, have, like Keith, to your point, have all these new companies coming in to kind of remove the friction. I think we're all still in the ecosystem. We all still have to work together to figure out how to make sure payment works for everybody in Canada and the world, I guess, the rest of the world. Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you,
very much.
Man. Thanks,
Thanks.
everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy
Man.
the summit.